Okay, we're good.
Yeah.
All right, so we're live.
You start recording.
Yeah, we're going right now. Welcome everyone to the Live Clean and Fight Dirty YouTube live
Podcast.
show. Okay, everybody
Live.
ready? At 4:30 p.m.
Yeah.
We're here and we go over different topics with UFC Coach John Hackleman. And today our topic is lessons learned from the UFC 296. Uh, this is your opportunity to ask questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to bring them up and I'll throw them out there as they come along. We do open up the floor for any question starting today at 5:15. So if you're watching this 5:15 Pacific Standard Time, we're going to open up for open questions. For now, turn over the tables over to John. John, so what are your thoughts on UFC 296?
Well, I have a thing that I call Sensei UFC. And like when our system was started, Kaji Kempo back in 1947, the Sensei was the bars and Hotel Street. So like the people that were developing Kaju Kempo, they were going to the bars down in Hotel Street. It's kind of the place down in Honolulu where the hookers were and the bars are and the fights were and the military guys used to go. And the locals didn't like that the military guys were down there taking their women and hanging out. And so they started learning Kaju Kempo, and that's where they practice. So the sensei was Sensei Hotel Street because that's where they learned. That's where they would practice their techniques, refine their art. When I started Hawaiian Kempo, um, I'm not proud of this, but I was a bouncer too at that time, and we would practice a lot of techniques in the parking lot once we kicked someone out and they got rowdy, and we'd test techniques that worked. But even more than that, we got to find out what worked in the kickboxing ring and in the boxing ring. So we didn't just make up all these techniques and say figure out a way to say it works and then make it up and then call it bunkai. You know what I mean? So we don't do that. We actually were practicing our techniques. So and then Valley Tudo came along. We started having to work on takedown defense, and then all of a sudden jujitsu off the bottom, work on escape. So our art has evolved immensely since 1985. And a lot of it was because of street fights and fights in the ring. Well, now that they have the UFC, where the rules are so much different, and it simulates a street fight so much better than a boxing match or a kickboxing match or a jiu-jitsu match. MMA simulates a street fight more than any other sport does. So I like to watch the UFC because it's entertaining. I love the sport, but also I learn a lot of techniques that I'll take out of that. And I even trained my guys for it when I was training a bunch of UFC guys and see if it works in the UFC, right? So pressure test, and then I bring it into our curriculum. I call that Sensei UFC because Sensei being teacher, the UFC is our teacher. So with that said, that was kind of a long-winded thing, but basically, let's think back at UFC 296, and not only should you watch the fight to be entertained, but watch the fight and watch techniques, strategies that work or don't work. Like if you watch, all of us see a lot of people thought head kicks wouldn't work. For years ago, I used to hear head kicks aren't going to work on the street. Well, guess what? They work. Okay. A lot of people would say, spinning back kicks wouldn't work in the street. Guess what? They work, you know. But then some people would say shrimping out of a mount is gonna work. But guess what? If they're shrimping and their hands are pushing on the leg, they're going to get knocked out. So guess what? It doesn't work. So you get to see what works and what doesn't work in the real world, right? So we take this sport called UFC and we learn all these, what works and what doesn't. Another thing that we've learned from the UFC, which I've known for years and a lot of people have, but it's right there on the big screen. If your conditioning isn't good and you start running out of gas, I don't care how far ahead you are. If there's any time left on the clock and you're completely exhausted, you will get knocked out. You will lose the fight in the UFC. If that same thing happens in the street, it means you will get knocked out. And chances are, if he wants to, he will kill you now because you're unconscious. So that's how I like to think of learning when I'm watching UFC. So here we go. UFC 296. Great show. I didn't watch the prelims, but if you guys out there have saw anything that you could take as a lesson from that fight, whether it's a technique or a strategy or even a concept, and bring it into your curriculum, what would that be? I'll tell you one right now. The Bryce Mitchell knockout. I mean, right there, that just showed the power that's in that overhand right, or I call it an H bomb because it's not quite an overhand right, but it does come over the top a little bit, so it's not quite a hook. I call it the H bomb. The H bomb. Basically, I've been practicing that for years, ever since Dan Henderson days, but it just reiterated to myself and my students, guess what? That punch you've been learning all the time and drilling, look how it works. And now my guys will practice it with more confidence, right? So that's one. What about you? What out of all the techniques that you saw win or lose fights this past Saturday, name one. You, Angelo.
Me. I'm watching the comments.
Other comments?
Comments. Yeah, I'm watching the comments. There's a few questions here. Do you want to take them or do you want me to answer?
Yeah. What's the question?
Okay, here. Let me see here. What were your thoughts on the Ferguson fight?
You know what it was? It was I think if I watched his last fight or his fight before that only, then I would say I think he should retire. But going off of his fight this past Saturday, I think it was a competitive fight. And I think he did much better than he's been doing lately. So whatever he's doing in this fight compared to his last five, I think this was a better show. So if I had to take it from like his last five fights, I might say, yeah, you should retire. But if I just watched this last fight, I think it was pretty competitive. In fact, I think it was pretty close. I think it should have been a 28, what, 28? Wait, it was 9, 9, 18, so 20. I forget how the scoring would be 9. So instead of I thought it had been 28, 29. So I don't think he lost by that much. He did lose without a doubt, but I wouldn't have kicked. I wouldn't say retire off of that fight.
All right, so there it is. Those are his thoughts. He shouldn't retire after that fight.
No, but then if you take the last few fights, and look at them and take his last five fights and put them together as a whole, then he probably should think about retiring. But what I'm saying is, if you just saw this last fight last Saturday, he didn't do that bad. What else we got?
That was the only question for now.
Okay.
So I guess my question, what did you think about Colby Covington's performance? It looked like he was doing okay, but then he ended up it looked like he got gassed. I wasn't sure. What were
Yeah, to me it looked like I would be willing to bet but there could be other things involved. But I'd be willing to bet he was overtrained. He looked like he was overtrained. I don't know about that camp. I'm not sure about it, but um, it looked to me like he was overtrained for that fight. He was stale. He didn't look like he was explosive. It didn't look like he was dynamic. It just looked like he was just kind of going through the motions. I mean, he even got, out wrestled. I mean, he just didn't seem like him. I think he was overtrained, but I don't know.
And I guess taking that to the next step, you were saying about, well, I mean, I guess this is okay. Here's a question. So there's a difference between getting ready, and we've talked about this a lot. There's a difference between getting ready for a street fight, which you don't really get ready for. You're always supposed to be prepared for that, and getting ready for a cage fight against someone who's a professional or someone who knows what they're doing. Um, what would you say about people who are your average person, right? Your average person who's trying to take away what you're asking right now, like looking for techniques, looking for things. What would you say to your average person who is a fan of the UFC but doesn't really train? Because I think that's the difference between UFC and some other stuff. Like I was listening to a podcast with Ryan Dressel, and he was talking about how in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu players don't watch that many matches because they're so busy training. So they'll watch some matches if their opponent's coming up. But as far as preparation's concerned, they're not as
Yeah,
prepared. But while
I mean,
UFC has more people that are fans of the actual sport, but they don't actually train. Kind of like a lot of people are fans of watching boxing, but they don't actually box, if that makes sense.
right. So
So,
what's the question?
so my question is how would you get people who are fans of the UFC but don't train to understand that training is important?
I mean, if they, I don't know. I mean, that's to me, it's separate, two different things. If you're a man and you don't train to protect your family, if you have a family and you don't train, then I don't know why your wife's still with you, to be honest. But there's a severe deficit in your manhood if you're a man with children or a wife or a family at all, and you don't feel the need to prepare yourself to be able to and willing to protect them in a life or death situation. If you don't routinely prepare yourself to protect your family, which is probably your main goal, your main job as a man, then there's such a deficit. I don't know what I would tell someone like that. I mean,
And again,
that's
a lot of people that watch UFC don't train. A lot of people
yeah,
don't train. They're fans of
yeah,
fighting. I've met people who know way more about the UFC than I do, right? They know more about the UFC than I do, but they don't train. And I've
yeah,
convinced these people,
yeah.
so like,
To me, if
why don't you train? Like my first question to them is, and I've convinced some of the guys to start training. Like when I start hearing someone talk about, hey, you do martial arts and you just catch this fight, that fight, and I'm like, I caught some of them. I don't follow the UFC the way I should.
yeah,
I'm just more wondering, like, you follow the UFC more than I do. Why do I'm kind of confused as to why don't you train? And then on the other end of this, we have the people who do martial arts but are in that camp where they believe that MMA and the UFC is not real fighting because it's no.
yeah. I don't think. I think those guys. I don't think there's as many of those guys anymore. Those guys,
I
those
think
delusional guys.
there's less of
Are,
them out there,
what?
less of them, but more of the other.
I think the ones that do think that way, I think they're so weak and cowardly that they don't want to really train to pressure test the stuff they're training or practicing or learning. They don't want to pressure test it because then they'd have to actually admit, well, I got to step it up and I got to up my training and I might have to get in uncomfortable positions and I may feel a punch in the face here and there. so I don't want to do it. And that's why that is the main reason men, whether they watch the UFC or watch football, I don't play football, that's why they don't do it. So they're cowardly and they're undisciplined, I think. I mean, for the most part, right? That's what I think. No? Too much?
That's
Too soon?
so so that being said, a lot of the people that do watch this show do train. So like, we just kind of
Yeah.
covered everybody who casually came in, who is a fan of the UFC. You heard it here. You get it. You better start training. And then if you're just your average martial artist that has this weird concept, there's less of them out there that feel that the UFC isn't real fighting, and that's why you don't like quote unquote MMA. Then I do encourage you to put on some gloves and try it out. Not don't
I
not
don't think I don't think there's
don't
many
knock
guys.
try it.
There's not many guys that don't like the UFC. I don't think. I think I just don't think there's many of them that don't like the UFC. Are there?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's not. So I don't think it's so much that they don't like the UFC, because I think what I've seen out of it, what I've seen out of the arguments online is always yeah, sure, but if there was eye gouging, then that wouldn't work. Or yeah,
Yeah.
sure, that would work. But if there was I don't know, if there was biting, that wouldn't work. And there's a lot of that kind of talk. So it's not so much that they don't like the UFC, they just still feel that there's some sort of other level of, I don't
Yeah.
know,
And there is. And there is. Well,
that
here it is. It's really simple. It's like there is biting. That'll win a fight. There's eye gouging. There's some other things that'll win a fight, and they can't do in the UFC. That's true. But if they allowed those things, then they'd have a bunch of blind fucking fighters, with that are dead. Um, and they're gonna have chunks of skin pulled off of they'll have huge scars and holes in their cheek. They'll have their nose bitten off. So that's true. That's allowed on the street. It's not in the UFC. So the UFC is as much as a street fight as it can be, with still being in a civil land. So if you want to allow those things, we'd be like back in that show, like what was that show that like in the future and they do the fighting to the death and
the Hunger Games. It'd be the
no, not the Hunger Games, but
it'd be the
no,
Hunger Games.
it was, I think, no, it wasn't Hunger Games. It was the one they went back to the future and they were driving the crazy cars and they had like
Mad Max?
crazy
Mad Max?
what? Mad Max. Mad
Mad
Max.
Max. Okay, so we'll go 80s for now. Mad Max. Hunger Games is the same thing. There are people being
What?
thrown in the ring,
Oh, I
giving
didn't see that.
weapons to try to kill each other. It's
Okay.
like it's the
So
modern. It's the same
So
thing.
if you left that, if
People
you,
are trying
you
to-
can make it like that, then nobody could watch it. It would never be sanctioned by any state. So MMA, with that said, MMA is not a street fight, and there are techniques that it doesn't address, but it's the closest thing to a street. Those same people are doing kata. They're doing kata like a fucking like a pop locker. Pop locking is more will get you ready for a fight more than kata will. I guarantee you that. Pop locking or breakdancing will get you more ready for a fight than kata. But then that kata person is going to say, "Oh no, that UFC is not realistic." Yeah, what I do is. So those are the kind of guys that say that. So my thing is the UFC is as close to a street fight as you can get without killing people in the cage.
So one of the questions we got here real quick was, how do I embrace pressure? Because you were talking about like you got to embrace
Yeah.
having the pressure. How do you recommend someone to embrace pressure in their training?
Pressure in their training. They have to accept it. Just they have to know that that's the only way they're gonna advance. It's the only way they're gonna get ready for a real life situation. And they just have to get out of their comfort zone. They have to, maybe in baby steps, maybe like when you're sparring, if you're not punching in the face when you're sparring, you're doing a disservice to your students. You're teaching your students to never block their face. Like Kyokushinkai, they keep their hands down so much they get kicked in the face all the time because kicking in the face is legal, but punching in the face isn't. So they don't keep their hands up because the kick's not going to come very often, but punches come all the time. So they get used to dropping their hands and they get knocked out really easily to the head because they keep their hands like this. Okay. So any sport combat that doesn't address punching to the face, you are doing a disservice to your fighters or your students. So here's one way to do it for you guys is you're the instructor. What I do is I give percentages. So, if I want the guys to bang it out, I'll just go freestyle, go. Boom, they're just gonna go. But most of the time, I don't do that because I don't want them continually getting hit in the head, and I don't want injuries and brain damage, etc. So usually I give 3 areas: legs for leg kicks, body for body shots, punching and kicks, and then face. So I'll give it an order of face. So I'll go, okay, we're gonna line up, get a partner, you're gonna spar. 2%, 85%, 8%. So that means 2% power to the face, that's all. 88% to the body, whatever you want to do. I usually just make it in the high 80s. And then 8% to the legs. Because I don't want people chopping each other's legs, kicking each other's legs real hard. It's an easy shot, and you're always gonna limp around. So that's one way to break into it. Just give a percentage. Say like, all right, I want face shots are okay, but only you can only have 2% of your power to the face, 100% of your speed, but only 2% of power. And then you got to check them all the time while you're the coach. The coach can't be in there sparring while everyone else is. You have to be watching. You have to be saying, hey, whoa, you're going too hard, or pick it up over there. So you have to be continue to walk around the mat and checking that out. So that's how I do it, and it seems to work really good. I've been doing that for a while. Back in the old days, it was just go for the knockout every time. But now I give percentages, and then for takedowns, I'll say 288 7%, and then half takedowns only, because the full takedown is usually what gets the knee hurt. Because once they start going in for the takedown, the other person starts trying to defend it. Next thing you know, he's on his back and his knee is dislocated. So that's how I feel about that. That's the way I do that. And then sometimes I'll let them from here down 80%, and then anything you want. But for the face, all you can do is hit them with a jab. So that way they protect their face. They have to keep their hands up because if they drop their hand, the guy will start popping with a jab. But they have to parry the jab and block, etc. So they're still used to getting punches to the face. But a jab doesn't carry a lot of power. It doesn't have the concussive power of a right hand or a left hook. So those are a couple ways where I I try to make it as realistic as I can without having a bunch of fucking brain dead students.
And then for those beginners out there, what kind of protective gear are they wearing?
I think everybody should wear at least 16-ounce gloves and shin pads. I think headgear is optional. Headgear is more for cuts than it doesn't protect your face against. It doesn't protect your brain from any kind of concussion. Headgear doesn't do that. It protects you from getting cut, and it protects your sparring partner from you cutting them. So for me, when my guys don't wear headgear, that's disrespectful to their partners, because if they cut their partners, they're responsible for the cut. And what is a cut? It's like thousands of dollars to sew up in the ER. So if you choose not to wear headgear, anything that happens to your partner, you're responsible. If you're both wearing headgear, then it's on the guy that got the injury.
So going back to the main topic, what would you say is the biggest lesson that someone can learn from the last UFC 296?
Well, I take each fight individually. So I'm going to say the lessons I learned was, number one, that fucking Dan Henderson, the H-bomb, it works like a charm. It's probably I would say the best all-around strike in in any martial art. Just that H bomb. It just showed it again. That reiterated to me how powerful that shot. I've never seen anyone knocked out that brutally. So that's number one. Then with the Kobe Covington, I would say, you got to watch your fighters really carefully, and when they have any kind of signs of overtraining, you have to pull them back. Like say, hey, take tomorrow off. You have to pull them back a little bit because there's signs of he must have had signs of overtraining. So that's what I think about that fight. And then there was the what other fight was there? What was the main event? Was that then what was the semi-main? Was that Bryce?
Let me check here.
Yeah. So those are two right there I learned from that. And then oh no, the other one was it was that was a brutal fight.
Alexander. I'm gonna mess up this name.
Yeah.
Koha. We had the welterweight, which was the Shavat Rob.
Yeah. Well, okay, that fight. Okay, here you go. That fight right there with Wonder Boy, right?
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, that was with Wonder Boy, and I'll tell you what I learned from that. Um, Sidekick. Practice your sidekicks. It's effective in the street. Wonder Boy didn't win that fight, but that sidekick was really effective. And if he wasn't fighting that fucking undefeated phenom, and even the sidekick even worked against him. So what that told me was that sidekick, it wasn't really. It's not as a lot of street fighting guys and MMA guys don't throw it and practice it, but Sensei UFC taught me from that last card that sidekick will work on the highest level of fighting. If somebody was rushing into you in a street fight and you caught him with one of the sidekicks, chances are he's going to end up on his butt and you can finish the fight or run. So those are the three lessons. Don't overtrain. Watch the overtraining. The H-bomb, keep the H-bomb and practice it. It'll knock people out. Have confidence in it. And the third thing is work on your front leg sidekick.
All right, so those are your 2 lessons right there. All right, so we're at that point where we're going to open up to you watchers, you listeners, and live watchers to your comments. So if you have any questions about any topic now, it doesn't have to be related to what we were talking about. We will answer them now. Work and Punch Productions asks, what's your opinion of the Okinawan fist? What is that? Do you know what the Okinawan fist is?
I think it's this.
Let me see.
The pinky, the big finger out.
Maybe. Here, I'm gonna verify that real quick. Hold on a second.
Yeah, it's like.
No.
Actually, I use that.
I think it is, but check it out. Oh boy, now it's showing me all kinds of different variations of the Okinawan fist. Well, the problem is there's different variations. We'll start. But yeah, one of them is the one you just showed. But here's the different ones that I'm seeing here. But yeah, that's one of them. That's the first one that came up. The one with the finger kind of down with the index finger.
I think what it helps is, and I use this. I've been using this for probably 50 years. Always like this with my right, and my left, I just have a regular fist. I don't know why I've done that, but I have. So the only thing that I think it helps is it keeps the trigger finger knuckle, top knuckle lower. Because when you don't do that, it comes up a little more. And a lot of times you hit this part of the knuckle and it's not as effective. So this buries this part, so you're more likely to hit with this part. So I use it a lot, but not with this hand. It's just the way it is. So that's why I think the Okinawan fist is good. I think, and that's what it is. You just put your little finger, see this finger goes here, straightens out. So yeah, that's what I think about that. Any other questions?
Yes. Yeah, Zen says, don't forget about the low blows. When we were talking about the illegal moves, the low blows like strikes to the groin. Robert,
is he talking about for MMA or real fights?
I think he's talking about real fights.
So real, I mean, to me, the groin if it's there in front of your face, which is awkward, then it might be an open target. But I think the groin is severely overrated because I've had people I want to talk about, hey, you should learn self-defense, and they just kick them in the balls. It doesn't work that way. It's like it's not an easy target, especially during the movement. It's like poking someone in the eyes. It's just not that easy to hit. So I'm not going to go after the eyes while making other targets available for my opponent. I'm just going to keep my fingers out, and if I get in close, I'm going to go for the eyes. So if I got in close where his groin was right here, I might start hitting his groin. But from a fighting stance, I'm not going to try to go for the groin because you're more open to knockout punches than you are if you hit them. A lot of times the groin hurts, but it's not going to stop someone. It's just not.
And then Zen says, I'm sorry, I meant in MMA that there's no low blows in MMA. All right. If you want to clarify that a little more, Zen, please clarify that and I'll bring it back in. Robert says, after you go live sparring enough, it's like eating. It becomes like everyday life. The H bomb is supreme. And try your mule kick, says Robert. Another another comment is, let's see here. Oh, okay. Mac Trey asks, we said, any question? Should I tell girls that I do martial arts at the bar in order to get laid?
Okay, that's funny, but it's worked for me. That's all I'm gonna say. You might think of that as a stupid question, and I'm not endorsing it, or I'm not putting it down. I'm just gonna say right here that has worked for me. So that's all I can go on.
I had to mute my mic because, man, that was too much. All right, so next question. Uh, let's see here. Yeah, Robert responding to back. If it works, back Trey, go for it. William John. Okay, here we go. My growing is a large, robust target, so it's fairly easy to hit. I don't know if that's, I'm not sure if that's a question or a comment. I'll just leave that as a comment. I don't think that's a question. Then Baron says growing strikes are not allowed in MMA, and that's true.
Yeah,
That's
no,
true.
no. They're not even allowed for women for some reason. This is the dumbest
Are they
rule.
making them wear cups?
What?
Are they making the women wear cups?
No, and they don't. They don't. It's such a dumb rule. Treating a woman's external genitalia like a man's. It's crazy. But anyway, it's illegal for whatever reason, because women don't get that bang all the time anyway, right? They don't get pounded all the time. And all of a sudden, one kick's gonna make a difference. Then they're gonna go home. Come on, guys. That's not true. It doesn't hurt. Anyway, it's a good way to take a 5-minute break. What else?
Uh,
You got any questions?
William John would like to clarify that he wasn't trying to say anything. He's just stating a fact about how large his robust target is.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
What they say, what they say about guys that say things like that. I don't know. I don't want to get into this. It's like a rabbit hole.
Well, we did. We told him. We told him they could say it. Maybe this is really our fault. We told them they can say anything, and they've definitely taken the liberty to do so. So we appreciate that. We did tell you, and yeah, we'll own it on that one.
Yeah.
So, if there's no other questions, I think we're getting close to the end of our show. This has been another fine episode of the Live Clean and Fight Dirty live YouTube show every week, Wednesdays at 4:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. We extended it an extra 30 minutes. We started a little bit late today because of a technical issue, but we're here and we made it, and we'll be here next week as well. So stay tuned for that. All right. Anything else you want to tell them before we go?
No, man, just go to Pit_Master on Instagram. Putting up new stuff where you can learn stuff and you can think about stuff and you can just change your opinion on certain things and give you build on to your opinion on other things. But I think it's a pretty good, you know, Instagram site. I mean, Joe Rogan likes it, so
Check
that
it
means
out.
it must be good.
And also anybody who's interested in training, the pit.tv
The
online
Todd TV.